Last episode of Hermitcraft, we constructed the Copper Cathedral, which I absolutely adore, and many of you said you liked it too. The reception for this one has been excellent, but it's gonna get better because I have big plans for this space. I'm of course talking about the space back here. We just built the front of the Copper Cathedral for now, and I've gone over here, moved our stock into these barrels, and I've also added the permit. But so far, I don't think anyone has actually come over here. And that's perfectly fine because I want to make a really good first impression. So later in this episode, we're going to be ripping out this front area and filling up the space behind with what I've got planned. But first we need to head out of here because I need to conduct some Minecraft science. And I also need to pay a visit to the Turtle Mosh Pit. Look at them go. Oh, this did not work out as well as I would have hoped. Breeding turtle eggs over here is probably going to be a nightmare, but that's okay. That's got absolutely nothing to do with what I got planned for this episode. So hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on the Hermitcraft server, where I need to gather up some copper blocks because the copper arc is not over yet. We've still got more to do with all of this project. You can see I've farmed up some fresh copper. And I've still got some oxidized blocks here too. These are going to be really useful for what we're going to get up to in this episode. We're really going to take things to the next level with the copper farming. But before I show you what I've been up to, we're going to jump over into a creative world to do some experiments, some testing, and do Minecraft science. We're going to take a closer look at copper aging, which relies on the game's random ticks. And luckily there is a game rule for this, random tick speed, which is currently set to 0. So none of the copper here will be oxidizing. Now what we can also do is set this to 6,000, which means it will be 200 times faster than its normal setting. The other thing we can do is put the game into a tick sprint where it tries to simulate it as fast as possible. So when I go and set this to 6,000, we will see this thing start to age pretty much immediately, starting with that corner over there. Despite turning all of these values up, it is a little bit on the slow side, but once it gets going pretty fast, right? And then you have to wait for one of these to pop up, and then those will spread. Oh, it's ever so entertaining watching what are essentially little pixels change color. So now we do the same thing again, except over here we've got this method of putting oxidized blocks underneath, and it's very cut and dry. This is a far superior method for aging the copper. I think we need to tone down the random ticks. I've now set this to 900, and my next test is just to see if this applies vertically as well. So we've got the same experiment, but this time we're seeing if it works the same way in this arrangement, and as you can see, it clearly does. Now, wouldn't it be nice if this was much cheaper? Well, you get 4 oxidized copper for every single regular copper. And apparently, this is not a mistake. It's an intended feature. So I say, let's go ahead and embrace this. We've got the cut copper on the side. Let's activate the test and zoom out. And it's really balanced. So it seems that the cut copper would affect the aging process roughly the same. But let's now entertain the idea that we wanted to go even cheaper because we can get 8 slabs for every 1 block. And over on the left here, they aren't even touching. Anyway, let's conduct the experiment. Zoom out. It looks pretty even again, right? Although you can see there's 1 copper block holding up there in the corner, slowing things down a little. But yes, similar result. This would also be a good opportunity to show you how these blocks can slow down the copper aging around it. So notice how as I'm placing these ones here, it's sort of stopping the later stages from actually spreading and getting closer to it. So this goes to show that occasionally a stubborn piece of copper that hasn't aged can kind of slow down the rest of the ones around it. On occasion with these tests, you might end up with one that appears to be slower than the other, but that's just due to some randomness. So we can speed up the aging with blocks below the copper, but what about above as well? Let's try this next. Let's activate the test, and it's going to be a little awkward to see into the inside area, but it kind of looks like it might be in the lead a little bit. I think it's fully finished just before that one. Let's slow down the tick speed and do that again. I don't have a clear picture, but it does feel like this one's first each time. Maybe not by much. I am running yet another one and it's clearly just slightly in the lead. Yet now it's finished and that one's still behind again. It's been close, but I've pushed this to a new extreme now and the results are really clear. Look at the one on the right hand side. It always gets there way before the middle or the left, and that's because I've gone and added another layer here and another layer down here. So what's the big takeaway from these experiments? The more oxidized copper we put back into our copper aging farm, the quicker it's going to run. If we beef it up with 2 extra blocks on either side, the copper in the middle will simply age faster. So, you know where we're heading to next, right? That's right, we gotta visit the witch farm, which is also the home of our copper aging facility. What you won't notice from this view up the top here is that I've actually doubled it up. Look! There is 2 layers to this thing now. And why do we experiment with copper aging when the copper blocks are arranged vertically? Because this thing is now going to push the blocks up and push them all the way back to the beginning. This is so that we can take the farm to the next level and actually automate the retrieval of these blocks so I don't have to go around mining them all manually. And there is a high degree of likelihood that with everything we're learning at the moment, that this will be a well and truly over-the-top contraption in terms of size. But that is absolutely fine because it's been a blast to put all of this together. So once again, we pretty much got the same piston pushing setup as below, except this time we've rearranged some of the redstone elements because now it has to push the blocks down and then across. But it's all been checked and verified, and unfortunately when I built this I hadn't done my experiment to see if it worked with slabs, because we could have saved half the amount of materials. But on the floors down below we used the normal regular block, and now up here we're using the much cheaper variant. And so according to all of that Minecraft science we just done, we should be using slabs and doubling up on either side. So down the bottom here I can go and add an extra row of these. And then at this layer, we can put them like so. But I ain't even going to worry about that right now because we have bigger fish to fry. I mentioned automation and not needing to manually mine these blocks anymore. We are indeed going to take this whole thing to the next level, something I didn't even think was possible. Using TNT dupers, we can reliably break off a single row of these blocks at a time. And as you know, we place them in a row and then they get pushed across. So they're going to arrive at the end here. We can destroy them with TNT, and whatever state they're in, we can send them back to the player to place again. So if it's not fully aged, it just gets put back into the cycle to go through the aging process. And that means this will become an AFK farm where I just stand here placing blocks and waiting for new ones to come into the dispenser, and then they'll get cycled through the system. And this has even more potential than that. I've got some other ideas to extract more usefulness from this setup, but let's go and check out the TNT dupers before I actually build them here on Hermitcraft. Now, you may just recognize the duper from the last episode that we did. It's actually the same one yet again with the input spam protection mechanism, which technically we don't actually need for this contraption, but there was this stone wall in the way, and that was to disguise what I had built this for. So with that out of the way, what's below should look very familiar. It is our redstone setup for aging copper, and you can imagine me on Hermitcraft placing blocks and filling up all of this row, which will push all of them forward, and that will get picked up by the TNT duper, which will be timed to fall down and break up a bunch of these blocks. Now, I've only got one of them in. We'll have 2 of them side by side, but it very reliably breaks all of these blocks across here. And the ones that were sitting on the obsidian, well, they're going to get pushed out into the water stream down below where there's hoppers to pick up the items when the next row comes in. And then that's when the TNT gets set off. So it's not going to accidentally destroy any of those items. And that, my friends, is how we automate the collection of fully oxidized copper blocks. And we're ready here to test it on Hermitcraft now, because up here, that is the TNT duper. It's been doubled up. But down here, you'll also see a jumble of redstone that I've kind of thrown together rather hastily. It's based off of the many auto crafters that we've built over at Loglands, but I've modified it for some very specific needs, okay? Look at this, waxed exposed copper and waxed weathered copper. So up the top here, we have some item filters. Let's check them out. We've got the exposed copper and the weathered copper because some of them will come through having not fully oxidized, and we can actually collect that. But then we're also going to use my stash of honeycomb here to craft them as well. So we're not just keeping some aside, we're crafting them as well. But once they fill up some of the space down the bottom here, a redstone signal is going to make its way up the top, and it's going to go into the side of the filter. So it's going to lock it from sending more blocks through. And that's after we've crafted and filled up this barrel. So these are just placeholder items, right? For now, we're going to keep a stack of each. And once that happens, everything else will come back round into this over here where I place the blocks. Hopefully you followed that. It basically means I can allocate amount of those two in-between levels of blocks that I want to keep, because we're obviously farming the fully oxidized level, and we've also got tons of this stuff too. So with that little contraption, what we'll be able to do is actually sell copper at all of its different ages. It's exciting stuff, but next up I got to test it, and since I'm probably going to spend a lot of time here, I've given myself a little security bunker. And I need to fill this all up with copper, which has reminded me that I've changed the speed at which this operates. Around the back here, I've put in this repeater, and the timing is basically perfect. The moment you're ready to push in some new blocks over here, after the TNT has dropped down, well, they push in straight away. Now that might get a little bit tight if there's a lot of players online and there's a bit of a hiccup, so I'm probably going to run this thing a little slower, but that is the precise timing required. And now that we loaded up all of these blocks, we're ready to give this thing a go. Obviously, I'm going to get copper for a very long time, but let's imagine some of the other blocks come through. Well, we don't want them to just sit here and not get picked up. So one of the things I need to do is actually fill up my inventory so there's only one space free for placing these blocks. So you can see here, the speed is reduced, so the timing works with the TNT blast chamber, and yeah, my doors did not survive very long. There's going to be a big delay before we see any action. All of these have to activate one by one. So when I put out a row, there's a little bit of a delay that needs to go all the way to the back and then all the way to the front before the blast chamber activates. We're getting close to the front now. By the way, I've added some trapdoors here to keep me safe. And over here, I forgot to add a filter for the fully oxidized stuff, which is what this is going to do. And then it breaks. Apparently I missed some pistons over here. Well, look at this. We're approaching the moment of truth. That'll activate the TNT dupers. This is always a little hairy, but it works. You know, we can rely on it. So this is where things get interesting. We're about to start pushing blocks inside of the blast chamber, and the next ones to go. Aha. It's actually blowing some up a little further back. Interesting. That did not happen on my test server. Huh. I think what this needs is like a consistent row of blocks back there to begin with. All right, here it comes. Down into the blast chamber we go. And watch this thing in action. Oh my goodness me, it's behaving different. I can't believe it. Let's make a long story short, shall we? I needed to place these blocks at a slower pace. And also slightly adjust the timing of the TNT dupers by adding in one extra observer. And now the whole thing works perfectly most of the time, with these occasional blocks in the middle getting pushed out, but it hasn't broken the farm so far. And this is where things get a little bit dull, because my time-lapse footage is just of the blocks being very slowly pushed into the blast chamber over and over again. But this thing has been running for over 2.5 hours now, and it hasn't broken yet. And here you can see me cycling between some of the weathered copper and the regular copper blocks. So they have gone a whole lap around, been blown up, and then put back into my inventory to go into the aging system again. This also means that we captured a whole stack of these blocks and crafted them into the waxed variant successfully, but There's none in here yet, but that will change rather soon because some of the partially oxidized blocks are now making their way across. So logically, the next step would be to AFK overnight and report the results in the morning. However, I have a sneaky suspicion that we are losing blocks. I've been watching the amount of them in these hoppers slowly tick down. Now that would make sense while we're harvesting all of these blocks, but currently we're just cycling the first two types in the system. So I'm wondering, why is it that the numbers are ticking down? Some time ago, a snapshot was released that changed the behavior of TNT explosions to drop all of the blocks that it would destroy. That would be a total of 17, and look at that, that's what we've got. I've actually conducted this test several times. The issue we have is that we're blasting two of these TNT at the exact same time, but that might affect the results of this. And what would you know, I'm placing all of the blocks back manually, and look at that, we don't have enough to replace the entire area. So it looks like our doubling up of TNT means that we're blowing up some of the blocks in the process. This is not good. And I think it's best to now put the project on hold for a moment. One thing I will point out though is that it is not difficult for us to get a lot of copper blocks, so some losses can indeed be tolerated. This is a very familiar feeling, trying ever so hard to innovate and make something awesome, and then one little detail you get hung up on, but I'm not going to stress out about it for now because that farm will still serve us some use even if it destroys some of the blocks in the process. But now let's go and talk about another farm that I built here in the end, and I spent so much time having issues with it, I kind of gave up on talking about it. And I think all I got to say is that I got there in the end. I figured out all of its quirks, and this is of course the farm that creates snowmen, puts them down here where we have a wither in order to farm wither roses, and I gathered all of these up, okay? So this is proof that this farm was an absolute success. Oh, we got absolutely tons of these wither roses. This is perfect for what I want to do next, as I'm going to need an extraordinary amount of black wool, which we are farming, and some literally popped off right then. Yeah, I need more than what's available here, so we can take other colors of wool and then we can turn this into dye to get as much as I need. We need all of this for the Copper Cathedral, for which I've cleared out more trees and added a path leading up to this glorious build. We need black wool because we want to submerge the entrance in darkness, and that's what this room right here is. It's simply the entrance to the shop. That's how massive this build is and why I needed to put it in the side of a mountain. There will be some ominous figures in this area that will relate to plans I've got for later in the season, but for now, I'm going to craft up all of my wool and, like I said, plunge this room into darkness. Now, I was going to play a game of guess what, but as I stand back here, some of you I reckon will know exactly what's coming next. We're going to build 4 figures in this room, which once again is just the entrance to the actual shop that'll be behind this area here. But yeah, look at it. We've got some darkness in here now, and when I take away these torches, it's going to get even moodier inside of this space. And while we check out the construction here, let's take a moment to talk about the audio in these videos, because earlier you may have heard some background noise. That is actually my computer, which has a 12th generation Intel CPU in it, which seems to absolutely kick out heat. And when it gets hot in this room, the fans kick up and it makes a lot of noise, which is really disappointing because I got a case that is designed to keep the sound of the computer as quiet as possible for recording, and that was fine with my old computer, but not with this one. Anyway, I'm also using a different microphone for this episode. I've been doing all sorts of stuff in the background, trying to tweak the audio and get it better recently, and it's slowly getting there. But when I heard the recording from earlier in this episode, and it was like, yeah, it was hot, the CPU had kicked up its fans, and you can hear it on this microphone, which was something I wasn't aware of. So please do cut me some slack. I'm going to continue to work on the audio stuff and hopefully we can get it a lot better with time. But let's check out this area in here. When I put together those time lapses, we didn't really get a moment to step back and look at the golems, which we can now do. And yeah, of course, that's what they are, right? The iron golem from the mob vote that didn't make it in, we've got them here represented in the 4 different stages of copper aging. And the block palette's kind of cool too. We use some stripped acacia wood there. On this side, it's jungle wood. Over here, I had to go with prismarine bricks, and then we went back to the wood. One of the nether woods was used over here. They look absolutely amazing, and they're going to become a bigger part of this shop than you can even imagine right now. But yeah, things aren't even ready to be opened because the actual shop is going to be built in the future in this space back here. And maybe now you understand some of my motivations for upgrading the copper aging machine earlier, because I wanted a bunch of those blocks pre-aged and waxed for that build, but I had to do most of it manually. But we shall now head back to the copper aging machine because I've had the time to think about a solution, and I think I've got one that's rather simple. So it's probably obvious that we need to stagger these TNT explosions so they don't happen at the same time. But the collection system here and the way that the blocks are pushed into it isn't really built for that. So I think if we rebuild this collection system to make it a little more versatile, we might be able to get the result we want. I have a really good feeling about this, and we are going to test it together. I've already tested the timing of this. As you can see, when we get a signal from the block pusher, there is a delay so that the TNT blasts are separate and they don't interfere with one another. And then the collection system just looks like such a better idea. The blocks get pushed into this space where they can be exploded. They won't be exploded back here. So the items should all fall into the water and get picked up by the hoppers. So now we have to test, and I hold down right click, reload the resource pack, let go of right click so then I can engage the free cam and fly around and look at this. And my one concern is that these waves might come a little too frequently now that we have a delay between the first and second blast. But there goes number 1, there goes number 2, and then it gets a push right after. That honestly looks really good. The second push will be coming in now. Oh, this looks like it's doing what it's supposed to. Excellent, excellent. I've watched a couple more blasts, and it looks like there's a slim possibility that the blocks might land on top of the ones behind them. So I think the last thing that we need here is some more obsidian on top, and then we're good. Although I've been running out, which is why there's some crying obsidian here. It also looks like all of the items get over to the hoppers before the next explosion, although that time was pretty tight. So I think what I might do is add an extra couple of ticks of delay before the second blast. That's it, my friends. I think we've actually done it. Remember, the goal here is to no longer mine blocks, but to have them automatically come into the system. And we've proven that we can do that and craft them into the wax variant. Now, these ones are starting to come through too. And of course, we get the fully oxidized ones into this chest, although I've emptied that. And if I need some of the normal copper for our shop, well, that just comes directly from the farm. At the beginning of this episode, we did Minecraft science that I have actually not put into action yet. I'm talking about the slabs to speed up the copper oxidization. Well, this whole thing has taken me many hours to figure out. And so it's something I'm going to do in the future. We want to balance it so that we get a nice amount of blocks coming through the system down to the end there. And the next step for me is to run a big AFK session overnight to just get tons of blocks out of this system. I'm going to be getting rid of all these honeycombs on both sides here. And I want to report back to you with some amazing results because look, we really have done it, but I want to get this episode uploaded and out to all of you. So it's a great reason to subscribe and come back for the next episode of Hermitcraft because I will have some really cool results to show you. But I'm pretty sure we did it. This looks incredibly promising. And we've done something I didn't know was possible, which is super cool. So thanks for watching this episode of Hermitcraft, and I will see you soon with another one. Bye-bye.